Today, we look at the tumultuous 1993 World's Beam Final, where emotions ran high, disaster was around every corner, and one question lingers to this day 30 years later. Was American Dominique Dawes robbed of a well-earned victory? Get ready for a dose of nostalgia and a closer look at one of the more controversial moments of the early 90s. All that and more on Robbed Goddess? Всем привет! Меня зовут Wally и добро пожаловать снова на мой канал. So coincidentally, we are headed back to the location of our last Robbed Goddess investigation, the West Midlands of England in the city of Birmingham. Last time it was for 96 Europeans. Today we are here for the 1993 World Gymnastics Championships, the first major competition of the new quadrennium. The 1993 Code of Points was a huge departure from previous iterations. No longer would originality factor into the bonification system. If a gymnast routine included all of the mandatory special requirements and value parts, her maximum score would be 9.4, meaning an additional 6/10 would be able to be gained via bonus points. There were now strictly two different avenues to obtain bonus points. 1. Special connections, in which a gymnast could obtain by connecting skills of varying difficulty, and 2. Additional D&E elements from the ones already required for that phase of the competition. Each additional D element would be worth 1/10, and any E element would be worth 2/10 in bonus. Now, it is very important to point out that a maximum of 3/10 could be obtained from each avenue of bonification. So a gymnast was only allowed to obtain up to 3/10 via special connections and only 3/10 via additional D&E elements. And that is what made this code really interesting, challenging, and fascinating when it came to evaluating start values, as we'll see in this very balance beam final. The first year of a new code generally results in lower scores as coaches and gymnasts figure out the best way to construct their routines to fulfill the new requirements. In many ways, the 1993 code felt akin to the Disney movie Aladdin. It really was a whole new world. Gone were the days where everybody started out of a 10 and it would come down to the minor nitpicks and the little issues that would separate the gymnasts, where subjectivity played such a major role. From this moment forward, start values would have a huge impact on determining the results and the medalists. The FIG had played around with an individual world championships the prior year in 1992, where only the individual events were contested. This year, the all-around was added as well, but still no team competition was held. Shannon Miller, the all-around silver medalist from the Barcelona Games the prior summer, came into this meet as the huge favorite. She dominated preliminaries, winning the all-around by over 3/10 and qualifying to all 4 event finals. During the all-around competition proper, Miller made a couple of uncharacteristic mistakes on beam in the second rotation, which opened the door for teammate Dominique Dawes, the leader after 3 rotations. But in one of the most heartbreaking moments of all time, Dominique sat down her second vault in the last rotation, which knocked her off the podium. In the end, Miller was able to come out on top, narrowly finishing ahead of Gina Gogian by only 0.07 of a point, one of the closest margins in the history of the sport. Shannon also had the top score of the entire World Championships on any event during preliminaries on balance beam. She scored a 9.887 and was the top qualifier into beam finals. However, she was suffering from a stomach illness, which had caused her to withdraw from the vault final earlier. She fell 3 times during her beam routine, which was gutting to watch. No pun intended. She scored 7.85, possibly the lowest score of her entire elite career. And she was not the only casualty of the precarious beam. He Shimei from China qualified second into the final, but a fall on her layout Shishova took her off the beam and out of the running. And it didn't stop there. The joint third qualifier, Oksana Fabrichnova from Russia, suffered a similar fate. She fell on her wolfish jump front tuck combination. Lyudmila Prince from Latvia did a beautiful routine, including a gorgeous layout back somersault, reminiscent of her teammate Natalia Lashionova. However, she was only credited with a 9.8 start value and finished in 5th place. This is where you start to see just how strict and stringent the judges were with crediting these start values. So with that quick recap of half of the final out of the way, we're going to take a look at the top 4 gymnasts in this final and see if the judges got it right, or if we can add Dominique Dawes to our esteemed list of drop goddesses. Perhaps the most important thing about this code of points was which value points were required during each exercise. And in finals, a gymnast was required to do 2 B elements, 1 C element, and 2 D elements. Now, a D or E element was allowed to replace a value part if one was missing, but in that case, you would not be allowed to receive bonus for that particular skill. And I feel like in finals, that's what made it so tricky for these gymnasts to get that 10-0 start value when they could only acquire 3/10 of their bonus from doing additional D and E elements, when 2 Ds were already required just to have the routine start from a 9-4. It was even more difficult on floor exercise, where Russia's Natalia Bobrova was the only gymnast to start out of a perfect 10 these entire World Championships. I also want to take a quick look here at our deduction sheet. As I said in my last video, this code of points felt more like based on vibes than anything. I feel as though a lot of the deductions were not that specific, and a lot of them felt subject to interpretation, for lack of a better word. I again am saddened to report that we do not have Monica Phelps, but we do have Haley Price, who was an '84 Olympian for Great Britain, and I think she was a pleasant surprise. I was not familiar with her commentary. This may have been one of the few meets that she ever called, but I think she does a pretty good job. And first step in the final is Gina Gojian. Running punch front mount. A little low in the landing, that's a D element. She does a switch leap into a straddle jump. See a lack of extension on that straddle jump. Little bit of a pause into another running punch front. Little bit of a balance break. It's another D element. It's a lovely full turn. I do enjoy the cadence and rhythm with which Gojian works beam. Here's her flight series. Back handspring, layout, step out, back handspring. She actually surprisingly had a little bit of a bent leg, it looked like, on that layout. There's a split jump into a back handspring. There's her gym acro. There's a kick into her move down close to the balance beam. I like this composition. I like her posture, her comportment is good. I like it. But she is really lacking difficulty. She's setting up for her dismount series. Back handspring, step out, back handspring, tuck double back. Tiny hop backwards, and not the most lift off the beam either. Here is another look at her series. Look at her layout, step out. Again, a little bit of a leg form issue there. So when all was said and done, this routine only started out of a 9.8. She did not make any upgrades from her all-around routine. So she did not add any extra difficulty, which is required in event finals. So I think for Gojian, I would have this at a 9.6, and you can see her score is 9.65. I'm sure some of the judges agreed with me and have that at a 9.6. A 9.65 seems a little bit high to me, because remember, she's only starting out of a 9.8. So shockingly, Lili was actually the last qualifier into beam, but she had the highest score on beam during the all-around, and you'll see why. This mount is so exciting. Love it. I think Lili is one of the best ever beamers in the history of gymnastics. Gorgeous amplitude on that switch leap into a stag ring jump, but as you can see, she had a pretty significant balance check. Watch this, back handspring to 2 layout step outs, perfect form. I love the flight on her back handsprings. Again, a little bit off on that full turn. Now here's her yang bow jump. A little unsteady again. This routine is full of originality and variety and just everything. She works all parts of the beam. It's just nonstop. Watch this. She does a Yurchenko loop. And then she moves into her own original skill that is named for her, the Lili spin. And unfortunately for her, in 1993, it was only valued at a C, so she didn't get anything for it. Now it's valued out of a D. That is a stag ring jump. She added another one because she needed an extra 10th to start out of a 10. But unfortunately, in doing that, it causes her to go overtime. Round off tuck double back. She tried to sell that landing like the judges would forgive that she went overtime, but no. Oh, it's sad. And look at this, just beautiful form. 2 layout step outs. Just gorgeous toe point. She's always on releve. She's always up on her toes or on the balls of her feet. It's just her rhythm is impeccable. I just love Lili on beam. That little leg turn is just gorgeous. Into this trademark spin. The commentators don't seem to realize that she went out of overtime because they don't bring it up. But that's a mandatory 2/10 of a point deduction. And her score with that deduction is a 9.6. I also would have had this at a 9.8. So with the deduction, it would be at a 9.6. So at this point, I would have had Gojian and Lili tied at 9.6. So next up is Dominique Dawes, fresh off a silver medal on bars and trying to do one better here on beam. So that was a tick-tock right into 2 straddle jumps into a beat jump. Great amplitude on the straddle jumps. And we talk about the special connection bonus. So here is her series, back handspring to 3 layout step outs. For that, she gets 2/10 of a point in special connection. So 2 of the 3 mandatory that she is required or allowed to get in special connection. There was a full turn. A running punch front. Good landing. You'll notice that Dawes does not have the same beautiful form that we saw from Lili. As Haley just said, sometimes a little bit relaxed in the knees. She did a switch side, which was a D. There she tries a straddle half, which she needed to get up to a 10.0 start value. It likely was not credited because she only starts out of a 9.9. Here is 2 back handsprings to a full in and just a hop back on the landing, but such an exciting, difficult dismount. It's another look at her series. You can see the legs, the knees are a little bit bent. Now, if they were completely bent, you could take up to 2/10 per element, but I don't think it was to that degree. The same thing with her series on her dismount, ending with a full in, just a hop back. So as with Lili, Dominique did have to add in that extra skill to get to a 10.0 start value. She needed to add an extra D element, but it likely was not credited, and this is why she only starts out of a 9.9 in the final. So with that in consideration, I would have this at a 9.7 out of a 9.9. And most of the judges agree with me. She scores a 9.725, which has her in first. So at this point, I would have Dawes in first, and then Lili and Gojian tied for second with a 9.6. So last up in the final is Lavinia Miloșovici, and she actually was not having the best worlds. There is her trademark eponymous mount. It's a round off chin down to the balance beam. It's a D element. Here's her switch leap into a wolf jump, but a little bit of balance issues there. Back handspring, layout, step out, back handspring. Good landing. Pretty good form on that. She gets a 10th bonus in special connection for it. Here's a wolf jump into, that is considered an Emelianchik in this code of points, and it was a D value somehow. So Miloșovici really took advantage of that element. She'll repeat it later in this routine. Here's a side somersault. Another D skill. And she looks a bit tentative, but she's moving fairly well. There's that repeated skill, that Emelianchik. So somehow she has all the difficulty that she needs to start out of a 10. Round off tuck double back, and she sticks the landing, which I think really made the difference. It's a bit shocking. I think this was one of the examples of the Romanians really playing the code. And to do it so soon after it came out is pretty impressive. Belu is low-key a mad genius. But the fact that she was able to get a 10.0 despite having not that much difficulty, they knew which skills to pick out and perform because they knew that they were rated higher than they actually were worth. Not the side somersault, which I actually enjoyed, but that bastardized version of an Emelianchik never should have had a D value. And the fact that that is what got Miloșovici to a 10.0 start value just kind of irks me, really. But the dismount was great. Great landing. Her score is 9.85. I would have this at 9.8 out of a 10.0 start value. So for me, it's a tad high, but it's still higher than I would have had Dawes. So when we take a closer analysis into this final, like I said, it really all came down to the start value of Miloșovici versus Dawes. Miloșovici got that 10.0 start value, and Dominique only had a 9.9 start value. That really hurt her. If Dawes had gotten credit for that straddle half, then I would have had them tied at 9.8, but since she didn't, and I don't think she really deserved to, I think the result was fair. Annoying, but fair. I have talked before to the point I think that people have unfollowed me about Romania's penchant to code whore, to do this kind of thing where they pick out the easiest skills that have the highest value in the code of points and then proceed to do them. Gojian was guilty of this so many times, and we saw here from Miloșovici. Should that routine have had a 10.0 start value? No. I mean, to me, she seemed tentative. She seemed careful. I thought Dawes worked with more aggression and amplitude and really showed maybe more command of the apparatus. And I really wish that could have been rewarded, but unfortunately, it all comes down to start values. And Miloșovici had a 10th higher start value, and that's why I have her winning. As you can see from the scores, Miloșovici got 9.85, Dawes got 9.725, so on paper, had Dawes even gotten that 10.0 start value, she still would have been second, but at least in my book, I would have had them tied for first. So I think this is an example where we have to be more upset with the code of points than with the judges themselves. I think they did a pretty good job of following the rules as they were written. So when we have to decide, is this another robbed goddess? Sadly, I don't think that it is. But I think it was really interesting to go back and look at these routines nonetheless, to evaluate them, and hopefully to give people a better idea of why they scored what they did. However, I would still like to know what you guys think. Is there a world in which Lili could have overcame that 2/10 overtime penalty? I don't think so, but maybe you have other ideas. Please let me know down below. I hope everybody enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit a thumbs up. I will see all of you guys in my next one. I think next I might be talking about the 1989 Worlds All-Around Final. I have questions about the bronze medalist there. In any case, I'll see all you guys in my next one. Take care. Do skóra. Bye, loves.